All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for Noragami, Season 1, Episode 6. All right, we've got ourselves a little bit of an emotional conflict going on here. Yukine is being used in ways that he is not happy about.
Yeah.
And it's something regarding not only his lack of experience regarding the whole matter of helping spirits pass on, but
lack of choice.
More specifically, the lack of choice. And this is something that seems to be a theme going forward here with regards to what they're setting up for Yukine. Is that everyone looks at him and is like, you're too young.
Yeah.
And
here he's being made to do things that a young person hopefully wouldn't have to do.
Right. And I think that in some ways, anyone wouldn't be comfortable with doing this. Anyone. Like, there's no one that should be comfortable with this. But it's the idea that he's specifically getting put into this situation, like, against his free will, and he isn't being told a lot of the things that, I guess, like, he isn't being properly prepared for this.
Right. He's not getting, like, a talk of, like, hey, this is what needs to be done. You know, if we don't do this, bad things will happen, you know, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like, if anything, Yato is holding a lot close to his chest for his own reasons. And we do know, about a little bit of his past via, what was her name? Kofuku, the god of misfortune. But still, that doesn't really tell us anything about him as a person. We have only to go on, I would say, more the little, consistent actions that he takes in the meantime. And based on that, I would say, if anything, he has a track record of pushing people away.
Right, so, maybe because of his past, in his nature. But
yeah, but you'd think then that if any other regalia were used in this way, they would also have similar qualms.
Right.
So it's not like Yato would be the literal only one dealing with phantoms, given that we saw, the other girl there. Doing that stuff as well.
Right. I guess maybe we'll explore that this episode.
Yeah, I would hope so, especially with the girl there, because she had her person that she was reporting to, or she was getting reported to by another person.
Right. We're not entirely sure what the situation is with her, but it's a new factor.
But yeah, y'all, without further ado, let's get into this. All right, everyone, now be sure to go check out the reaction portion of the video in the description below, then come back here for the discussion.
Well,
all right.
This is a jam-packed episode.
Yeah, this was an action-packed, full of chaos and madness episode.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah, and what I liked about it was they kept the story and the plot simple so that they could move through the individual set pieces quite quickly. We get Yato and Yukine having a little bit of an awkward bit of tension as we reveal... Oh, no, wait, that's a little bit later.
Right.
But the whole thing with his neck going on. But basically there's a schism that's growing between Yukine and Yato, and it's one that's not going to be easily fixed by even a outside, force coming in to drive them together or something. But what it might do is it might force a good conversation where Yato actually talks a little bit with Yukine about all this stuff. But so far, he hasn't done that yet.
None. Like, not at all. Even when, like, it's, he's trying to get Yukine to basically shape up, right?
Right.
When he is the experienced one. He's not taking that first step, right?
Right.
So
it's his weakness as a character, which is responsibility.
Right.
And that makes sense. In some ways, he probably does this to take care of himself in a weird way.
Sure.
Because he's not necessarily he's a bit dysfunctional in certain areas.
If he wasn't, he would be a better god. Like he'd have more followers and stuff.
Right. But as we know, he is or was a pretty crazy god of war. So he probably has his own burdens and things like that lead to him having some dysfunctional, tendencies.
Right.
But he also has kind of a lot of people that don't like him.
Yes.
In this case, now we've met Bishamon, aka Vina, a god of war, and in fact, the strongest god of war.
Right.
And what's interesting about this is now we've got multiple of the same god type.
Yes.
You know, which is good to
share
know.
domains. Yeah.
Exactly. That means in a lot of ways that, like, there can be, you know, duplicates of that where, you know, people have different approaches to certain things.
Oh, for sure.
So let's take Vina, for instance. She seems to be the one that has figured out how to do Nakama and, you know, working together quite well.
Oh, yeah.
Actually.
Yep. She's even has a regalia that's just for managing the relationships of the other regalia. Maybe not relationships, but
more
tactical.
like the tactical stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is awesome because then she ends up really relying on that specific regalia, like quite a lot.
Yep.
Which is something that
Yato hasn't
done.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because in some ways, what would that look like if Yato gave Yukine that level of
trust and
just letting him decide what he does, because you know Vina still gives that regalia commands, you know, like analyze this, find this, you know, all that stuff, but because he's not being used specifically as a weapon though, you know, it's like that interesting thing there is that every regalia we've seen thus far. Yeah,
she's not physically controlling how he moves and things like that. She's asking him to do something like of the mind. Yeah.
Right, but that's something that it seemed to, at the very least in my mind, contradict what I thought a regalia was. I thought all regalia were meant to basically cut and...
or be a weapon of some kind. Be a weapon
wielded by a god in order to stop phantoms. But maybe, no, this is part of Yato's own kind of specific view on things. Yeah, in that he's a god of war. So all he's good for is slashing, as Vina brought up.
Right, because they weren't talking about Yukine there. Because it's like, abilities unknown, you know.
Right, exactly.
They were talking about Yato.
Yeah. And so maybe there's something there. Because then when Kofuku shows up...
oh, yeah.
She didn't have a sword.
Nope. She had a fan. Which is perfect, because she's lazy.
She fans the flames of madness. That's what it is.
And the underworld and everything, and just, all right. I'm so glad that it was the sort of accidental nuclear strike, you know, where it's just like, okay, yeah, this is fine. Just come help. Oh God, what did you do? You went to them for help?
Yeah,
like,
no, this was a big mistake. I also love how Yato wasn't immediately angry with Hayori though, because he was like, why'd you bring them? And she's like, well, you said go to them if I'm in danger, and he's like, oh.
But that's not what I meant.
That's not what I meant, but I mean...
right. Yeah.
He's like, I wasn't expecting to run into to Vina or Bishamon or...
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, all right.
Yep. I love that the way that we basically saved Yato and Yukine from a situation where they really were in trouble, right? Was a combination of serious and comical, right?
Yeah.
Because when Kofuku showed up, right, it's like, oh yeah, that's the natural thing that we expect, and then it's the comedy of, God,
what she did is not what we would have expected.
Right, exactly. What has been wrought here, you know?
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of that, you also get Nora showing up. And that's, and the fact that she doesn't do much to help, she just does like a little bit. That's what makes it even, like, she stopped the lion. You know,
I think she saved Yato's life there.
I think so too.
If we go by the rules of what a lion in the real world would actually do to Yato, who's representing a human being.
Tear him to pieces. Yeah. Right. I'm more talking about the idea that it wasn't flashy. It didn't like take the spotlight or whatever. It was I don't think precise and, you know, and effective.
Right. I just don't think she was wanting to call attention to herself.
I don't think so either.
Right.
That unsettles me because that means she wants to be the one in the shadows that just comes up and whispers and is like, you could always use me. Yeah. Because one of the things that I'm really curious about is what other people would say if they saw Nora and they recognized her, right?
Good point.
Because given that they know Yato, right, they probably know her.
Given the amount of tattoos she has,
right?
that has something to do with either, because the tattoos, I believe, are closely connected to the names of
the
regalia. So is it that she has different kind of regalia inside her, or is it that she represents something that has maybe slain many regalia?
Sure, or
just has a lot of history attached to her.
Right, definitely a lot of
I would
history.
assume that's the easiest kind of thing to determine from that.
Yeah.
I like also how Vina's whole unlimited weapons works thing is something where I almost immediately started to come up with an explanation for it as everything she has is regalia. Oh, cool. So then whenever she brings out a bunch of other regalia, like when she brings out the gun above her head, that was so cool.
Oh yeah, that was great.
I'm like, oh, cool. That could have just been an item that we didn't see, or even it could have been a piece of clothing.
Yeah.
That would have been a really cool detail to have, is like when we saw her belt or something like that. And then like the sword is in her hand there. We see she's not wearing the belt. Like the belt transformed into the sword or something. But I guess we'll find out where she keeps all these weapons, how that whole thing works and stuff like that.
Which means there's two things. One, that we have to at some point have the point where she is talking to all of her weapons or whatever, or she just assembles them and she's just like, all right, I'm naked. Right.
Yep.
You know, because that just has to follow. But also, if you want to go as far as reasons for fan service, okay, why isn't she wearing a shirt? Well, maybe.
Yeah. We talked about this in between. In between the.
What if? And this is totally like crackpot. But what if her shirt was the regalia that Yato killed?
Yeah. There you go.
You know, there you go. Right? She doesn't have a shirt anymore.
I'm never gonna wear a shirt again to remind myself.
Exactly. Until I've slain Yato and avenged my destroyed shirt, aka regalia.
I mean, they're people.
They're people.
That's the thing.
That's the thing that Yato could probably remember.
Well, that's the thing also, is why we probably got so early on his little comment about death and people dying.
Yeah.
Is in some ways maybe one of the things that is something we'll come to understand a little bit more over the course of the story. Is that a regalia dying, even though the person has already died with their physical body, is a much better end than anything else.
Right. You don't want them to turn out like Nora or potentially something worse. Like,
well, right. But think about it this way: if you have phantoms as your carte blanche, negative spirits, basically,
right?
Anything that's not a phantom that dies cannot then become a phantom.
Right.
So, I mean, sorry. Unless they're a human, just a regular human.
But among the spiritual entities, and that's what I'm
guessing is basically the point, is that
they purify them
by purifying a spirit and turning them into a regalia, for instance, by doing the whole contract thing with the god and stuff, they're probably setting them up for a much better time in the afterlife. However,
the corruption is also a
thing. The whole blight thing is something that's rather interesting, because the way it seemed to be relationship-wise is that this is tied back to the initial transaction that happened when Yato ascended, basically, Yukine to a regalia. He took all the memories upon him. He took all the burdens of that. But when Yukine starts to act in a way that is a little bit immoral in terms of the god's way of doing things, the negative repercussions of that, him turning into a phantom as he would if he was a regular spirit, goes to Yato, who is a extremely powerful being, on the scale of
more important that he doesn't go bad, or get turned or whatever.
Which is a weird dynamic, because what I'm guessing it is that a god has, if we think of it in video game terms, he has a threshold to where he would go,
some
phantom
HP
of some kind like that,
or whatever,
that is infinitely higher than the regular spirit, and also just magnitudes higher than a regalia.
Sure, that makes sense.
That just makes sense, right? they're just
right.
more.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, you have the experience of knowing how to handle something like that. So, okay, purify, it's not quite enough,
right.
That kind of a thing.
Yeah. But in this case, this is something where Yukine has not been moving in a healthy direction since that point. Mm-hmm. So Yato might end up having to think about his own safety and his own survival if this gets too far, because that relationship is one that's already starting to build up that little bit there, which I think is a really cool thing to have it be on the burden of the god then to restore the relationship, because they have a selfish, just basic survival reason to do it.
Sure.
2, they're the ones with all the extra
authority, responsibility
and all that, so they should be the ones to do it. Thirdly, in this case here, they're the ones making the regalia do the things that you could say they get to do because they're in this situation. But this is just...
Right, they made them a regalia in the first place. And, it feels very similar to me to the controlling parent, one, because, the god making a regalia and the parent, bringing the child into the world and then, being like, I control you kind of a thing. But then there's that whole idea of, you can do some things that might influence them, but you don't in this case, Yato comes pretty close to controlling Yukine, but when it comes right down to it, Yukine is still his own person.
Yeah.
And by trying to use that right-handed power, force Yukine to do what he wants and things like that, it ends up just pushing Yukine further away, which has a direct negative influence on Yato.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. I think that as a system, this world feels more and more, connected in a way that I really like.
Sure.
And as a spiritual world in general, where things are generally just a little bit fuzzy on the explanations as to how they work and all that, I really like the almost I would say, just based on how early in the story this is, excessive levels of proper nouns
mechanics and
little mechanics and things like that. I don't feel at all intimidated by them saying that there's a vent now that just got open to the underworld, capital V. And I'm I get all that.
Right. It seems pretty straightforward as far as what it represents. Right. It goes with the territory.
Yep.
And there's enough sort of logic to the mystical, right? Because, spirits and all that stuff, that's pretty mystical, right? Usually there isn't as much logic to it, right?
Exactly.
That's kind of the whole point. But because there is that logic to it, then there's this feeling of internal consistency where it's okay, I can get to know the inner workings of how all this stuff ticks, and I'm not going to get lost along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Action was great.
Yep.
I loved also how well the clip pacing of the characters ordering and doing dialogue and doing all this stuff there in the midst of this chaotic action, because when it came down to it, there were actually a lot of different people involved in this fight.
Oh yeah.
So we have Kofuku and Kuro. They join in as reinforcements with Hayori. Then we have Yato and Yukine. Then we have Vina and her main regalia. Then we have the lion. Well, I would say they're the main two. The other ones I don't really count yet. Although the whip did get hurt a little bit from when that initial fight happened, which is probably why she called out the
breaker sword.
Yeah, exactly. The Ichigo sword, basically.
Yeah.
Then we have the lion and Nora. So we had 9 parties involved. Plus extras that were all doing things in the midst of this, and it just felt like it moved really smoothly.
And by the way, one of the things that I really was blown away by in this episode. Now, the stuff with Yukine, that was established as a point of conflict in the previous episode, right? It had been built up for this, so that it makes sense that this is happening.
Yeah.
But with where the story started off at the beginning of the episode, I wanted to say the first episode as if there were 2 episodes for this, but it was just the one.
Right.
It starts out with Yukine's conflict, right?
Yeah.
It's very slice of life. It's kind of what's going on with Yukine. How is he going to deal with this? you know,
he goes off and goes to the mall.
Yeah, going to the mall. Hayori making him cookies and hot chocolate, right? Like
him seeing the little phantom eye in the
exactly.
Milk, you know,
all of this stuff that I would never have expected would turn into we've got 9 different parties in a crazy battle in a forest that didn't start right, a near free for all that didn't even start in the forest, right? Like that. I love that. Yeah. I love that. All of that crazy, awesome action happened as a result of the schism. Like, yes. It was as a result of Yato's also previous, actions, right, from a long time ago. But it's also as a result of the schism between him and Yukine. So it's showing that, hey, you not addressing this causes issues, right? Yeah. But the fact that it covered all of that in one episode and it didn't feel rushed, like that blows me away. So, major props.
I will say I've been giving the show a lot of praise for the internal consistencies with regards to a lot of the way the themes and the mechanics are starting to make me feel naturally brought into this world. However, I will say there's a couple things that now start to feel a little bit iffy here.
Oh yeah.
And it's more just that I don't really understand how certain things are done. One is that Yato has been shown to be able to teleport to almost anywhere like he needs to be. But he usually does it specifically to come to the scene where we're at. So it feels more like the plot just kind of having him jump there. I don't know if it's something where he can jump specifically to Yukine, like, or specifically like Hayori. But it feels like if he could do that,
he could get away.
He could get away instantly because there isn't something with the way they set up how Bishamon or Vina jumps into the scene that she was actually able to detect him beyond seeing him.
Gotcha.
So I feel like that's a little...
Right. Yeah. The fact that Yato has survived until now means that she can't just track him perfectly and get to wherever he's going.
Exactly.
As far as the teleporting goes, what I always just sort of figured is that it was the speak of the devil and he shall appear, right? Like maybe with Yukine he's a regalia, so he doesn't even need to do that because they have that connection. But then in the case of Hayori, she would like be talking about Yato or thinking about Yato or something, and
then he would show up. It's kind of like a god answering a prayer, basically.
Exactly, right. And that's also
that kind of works.
A good limitation on it because Yato doesn't have any followers, right? He has Yukine and Hayori, and those are the only people that really know he exists or care about him, right?
Okay, I'll accept that explanation for now. I just felt like it was a thing that I literally was not... I did not care. It came up immediately in my mind, and then I was like, I don't care. I don't care. But it was when he ran in a straight line down an alleyway, and she started firing and missing all of a sudden. When she had her perfect aimed shots, and when he was moving in a different trajectory, and then he cuts the air with those bullets, and I was like, all right, now I have to actually be a little bit like, not nitpicky, but a little bit like pointed onto some specific things.
It's one of those things where if you have someone with a gun and someone else that doesn't have a gun and the person with the gun is trained, just as a plot thing, how do you write around that? Because if they want to kill the person...
You have them cut the bullets with the sword. That's how you do it. Cut the bullets with the sword. That's how you do it. Because screw that. Right. We're doing badass cool anime stuff.
Exactly. Because apart from that, it's they're in line of sight.
Yeah,
you could pretty much like
you could go with the angle of she shouldn't be holding it with one hand anyway, because
right? But she's a god, she's hyper competent, and she has another regalia that just helps her aim target and things. So she
literally has a targeting reticle heads up display setup.
Yeah,
but I love
cool.
I gotta say I love the potential that they've set up for that regalia specifically. Yeah. Is it Kazuma?
Yeah, Kazuma. I think so.
Okay, because Kazuma, I'm not sure if Kazuma was the lion or not.
Oh, that might have been a different one.
But either way, that regalia, the way that it has this really trusting bond with Bishamon and calls her by her like her legit name, I think.
Yeah.
And she stops.
She's like,
okay, I understand. And then when they leave, she gives her, kind of anger towards Yato and lets it out and then walks away. But he stands there, waits a little bit, has this kind of knowing look of like, like, I understand you, but I can't, I can't accept you. So then bows in respect, which is
bizarre
different.
For one of the gods that doesn't have any following.
No, regalia.
No, I'm talking about that. Yes, he's a regalia, but we've established that regalia, bowing to other gods, is not something that's generally supposed to be done, right?
Yep, exactly.
And it's not like Yato's some super important god. He's a forgotten god. Well, now, but it's more of that hinting of like, what was he back then? Maybe Bishamon wasn't always the strongest god of war.
I think you're definitely on the right track there. But thank you for bringing up again the whole regalia shouldn't bow to a god thing. That is a very important piece of little world building where you're like,
so what was that about?
You're like, whoa, hold on. This guy seems to know his business. He seems to be a regalia that's at very least been around for a very long time because she's been around for a very long time, Vina.
Right.
But then why is he then doing things improperly?
He's her HR, or PR person as well.
Well, I could definitely see that for sure. Probably. I could also see it being her bra. That's probably the PR one there. It's been like, no. We got to leave the shirt. I know it's a place of honor. We also have to give ourselves the best foot forward, if you will, for all the other gods, because we do ourselves have a bit of a reputation.
Got to rein you in, Yeah, just a little bit.
Don't worry, I'll make you look good.
Yeah,
I got your back. I also got your front. But anyway, so
oh boy,
this is a good action set piece episode. Yeah. We got ourselves a lot of conflict, but I like that this outside force didn't resolve the glaring issues within the dynamic of Yukine and Yato.
And because the inner issues aren't being addressed, this is just the chaos is building, right?
So the chaos building,
like not in an immediate sense, like the battle was stopped, but like Nora is talking to Yato, and and like all this other stuff that's happening,
right? But I feel like what's building here in a weird way needs to be reminded that it's actually building on Yato,
right?
Because the consequences are not actually hitting Yukine. And this is the part where I would love some classic, good old-fashioned vulnerability. Because
that would be nice.
If Yukine doesn't know what his actions do, even though he doesn't like Yato, he might think, well, I don't hate him. It's just like, dude, you need to treat me like an equal. And in order to do that, you need to show a little bit of trust. You need to show a little bit of vulnerability and be like, hey, you see this? You see this going on in the back of my neck? So I need to tell you about this whole mechanic here.
Right.
Let's sit down and talk about this. And I liked that Nora being there in the fight. It's perfect. Because our imaginations, I think, do so much better for Nora than the show almost ever could by telling us.
Yeah, I agree.
Just by seeing her and knowing a little bit about what we know about the world and her design and her voice, our imaginations run wild already.
It's the same reason. Well, okay, I don't know the reason why Yukine is necessarily afraid of the dark, but why people in general are afraid of the dark is because you don't know.
Right.
It's mystery, right? It could be anything.
Yeah.
And Nora is that, right? You know, we see her with, and she talks in her creepy voice and everything, and whatever that thing is on her head, and we're just like, you stay away. Like, no.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Well, y'all, this was a fantastic episode. Great animation, great soundtrack, great setup for future stuff. And okay. All right. Yeah, this is gonna be intense. So thank you all so much for watching this episode's reaction and discussion. If you want to see the next episode's reaction and discussion right now, though, go check out the link in the description below for our Patreon. You can get on early access there. You can watch full-length timer reactions there, and all this comes with Discord access, so you can chat with us in the community there about this show, about anime in general, and you can also talk with Jacob about the sci-fi novel that he wrote.
Yep. Wrote a sci-fi novel called Battle Lines. It's on Amazon for purchase if you're interested. The link is in the description.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, we'll see you there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.